at the red light. We are on air. I should have started with radio. It's nice how I started an episode just by talking to myself. Well, welcome to the show. You've been watching my show, you know me. This is nothing script, nothing planned, and oftentimes I just get a recommendation, sometimes from Sean Martin. So if you don't like this guest, you can point the finger to him. He's a good friend of Sean, and a good friend of Sean is also a good friend of mine. But because we're going to talk about privacy and identity, he didn't want to tell me his name. So I'm going to just let him introduce himself, and we'll go from there. Look at that. That's where we are. We can't even say our name anymore.
So I usually just make up a name and lie to people, but for our purposes, my name is John Salomon. I've been in information security in various parts of the industry for about 30 years now. I'm Swiss, as you can hear. I live in Spain. I started out doing network security. I ended up doing architecture, risk management, a lot of cyber threat intelligence, and I've been mainly working both with mentoring startups and doing a lot of pro bono work for industry associations, as well as doing various areas of publishing and advisory work for public-private societal cyber defense against disinformation, policy-related stuff. Everything that interests me as not only a professional but also as a citizen. So I saw the privacy topic and I thought, hey, this is something it's really timely right now, and I thought I'd jump on that, and I appreciate the opportunity to join you for that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you made it. I mean, I know you can talk about a lot of different topics, and that's usually in our society, and that's why I love this topic. I come from sociology. I love technology. I took that train. I'm not one of this Generation X that didn't take that train, and I love to look back at analog and digital and the way the things were used to be, but not in a nostalgic way. I look at it from a sociological perspective and how it's just the way the society changed. And it happened that nowadays, because of technology, change a lot faster. So when you mix technology with society, which you have to, you cannot avoid cybersecurity. I mean, you can try as much as you want, but you can't. And so the fact that you can talk about a lot of different topics, it goes to show that that's the society we live in. Like, you're a cybersecurity expert, professional, and you can touch on a lot of things from politics to society, because that's just the way it works.
Well, there's a Robert Heinlein quote, regardless of what you think of him as an author or his politics, specialization is for insects.
Go tell that to John Smith, and then again, he did that a long time ago. But listen, I want to start with this. So when I asked you what is the topic that you're really passionate about when we met the other day, you went right away into privacy and identity. And I want to know what is that actually tick your brain right now? What is make it go light up and be like, we have to take care of this. We have to talk about this. And it is obviously related to privacy. Then we'll go a little bit back into the way maybe change it through the year, but just to get the fuel for this conversation.
Mm-hmm. So right now in Europe, in the European Union, there is a very, very active discussion around a proposed law currently being proposed by the Danish Information Commissioner, I believe, commonly known as chat control. I don't pretend to remember the exact formal title of it. It is part of a series of ever-present attempts to, in this particular case, to break what is colloquially known as end-to-end encryption. So basically what they want to do is they want to mandate that mobile devices, communication devices, that there is a way for law enforcement to gain lawful access to encrypted communications at either side of the encrypted tunnel. Chat control currently has passed the European Council of Ministers, and it's about to go to the European Parliament. It's in its third iteration. It's failed twice. Germany and Poland currently have expressed their disapproval, along with some other countries. It is one of several laws, both proposed and passed, sometimes failed, that basically attempt to do the same thing, and that is to let governments access encrypted communication for a variety of reasons, whether that is to protect against child abuse materials, to detect drug trafficking communications, to find terrorists, to otherwise protect society. These may be familiar. If you're a bit older like us, especially if you lived in the U.S., you may remember the Clipper chip, which was an FBI attempt in the early 1990s to introduce a hardware solution that could decrypt messages. And the reason, I'm somebody for whom privacy is, I don't have anything to hide. I use my real name on social media, but it is for me, privacy and anonymity are among some of the fundamental rights of democratic citizens as part of being able to exist in a liberal and free society. And I prefer, by the way, the term information security to cybersecurity, because it's kind of it covers a broader spectrum of topics. Mm-hmm. And I think as information security professionals, whether technologists, lawyers, activists, whatever, managers, we know, I think, more than the average consumer, the bricklayer, the accountant, the doctor, because they don't have to. The same way I don't know enough about medicine to comment. I think we have kind of a duty to keep an eye on attempts by what I like to refer to very judgmentally as well-meaning idiots, who really, I think, want to. Very often there is not a nefarious supervillain attempt to subvert democracy and liberty. Yeah. Somebody really wants to do the right thing. But I think we have a duty to use our knowledge and our experience to keep an eye on this aspect of democratic stability and liberty and freedom, and do what we can to avoid or help avoid moves that could cause way more damage than what they promise to solve.
Yeah, I'm to that. If you look back into society, and we're going to start doing just that, because I think you gave a good starting note for this side of the conversation, is any regime, anybody, even back in during the time of the king and the emperors, the way, or we just get 1984 in the book, Orwell. If you can get access to people, you can control people. It's that simple.
It's the panopticon.
It's that
right?
simple, right?
It's the panopticon, right? It's the idea of the Victorian era model for the perfect prison, where all the cells face inward, and in the middle is a tower with a guard in it who can see everything. There's no walls, right? It's the transparent citizen, where if you can tell what people are doing, you can spot evil early on.
Yeah, but also you can do a lot of other things. And historically speaking, without, again, we said we were not going to go into politics, but...
Oh, we are. This is politics. This is absolutely politics.
I'm political science, so I can go to politics, but I like to talk about politics, meaning I'm not taking sides. I'm just being, and analyzing from a third-party perspective. And anytime, even if you say you have good intention, even if the people in Congress or any other place where they make law, the Senate or whatever it is, in another country, they may be naive about something. Like you said, you may have good intention, but when something happened, like 9/11, for example, which is a recent case, and you do certain law that go and infringe privacy, we never go back. We're never going to say, hey, now we're going to go back. So these are not steps like the one that you're mentioning right now in proposal law in Europe and in Denmark, that they cannot be taken lightly. And we could talk politics. Are we involving the right people in this decision? People that actually do know about encryption, people that do know how.
Well, let me contextualize it this way. I think it is, in a way, it's technology, but all technology in a way is politics. It's like every a guy I used to work for once told me that everybody in a company is a salesperson, right? Because you are part of selling, even if your job is not to go to customers and sell. everything that we do has a political impact. And that's why I say we are going to talk politics, whether we're not going to talk about right versus left.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I meant.
But this is basically a question of understanding what it is that we're trying to solve. Is this the right way to solve it? And what are the potential negative outcomes, the unintended consequences, or maybe intended consequences, depending, of implementing these techniques, these laws, these norms, even, right? I'll give you an example. You mentioned 9/11. That's a really good one, right? And after 9/11, I was in Switzerland, but I remember the frenzy around, when the Patriot Act was passed, right? Very often these laws, regulation of investigatory powers, RIPA in the UK, same thing. Very often these laws are passed in the fervor after a catastrophic and traumatic event. Got to get these guys, right?
Yep.
Similarly, I mentioned a couple of things that are very often used as I'm going to very judgmentally say straw man arguments. I obviously have an opinion here, and I'm going to be very unapologetic about that. Marco, I ask you, do you support terrorism?
That's a rhetorical question where
Are you?
There's only one answer, right?
Exactly. Are you for child sexual abuse materials, child pornography?
Right. Same question.
Do you support money laundering and tax evasion?
Yeah. No, I know where
Right?
you're going. Then
Exactly.
If
Right?
you are with, if you're not with, you're against, right?
Well, it's not just that, right? It's more
You
subtle than
accept.
that. Right?
You must accept these choices.
It is
That's how they're selling it.
Yeah, it's the classic straw man. After 9/11 was terrorism, right? This is interesting because do you support drug traffickers?
Yes, sir.
A provision, well, it depends. I mean, farmer, right? A law that was shot down recently in France that attempted to do the same thing, basically mandates lawful. This is a good phrase, right? Lawful access to encrypted data. Harmless, right? It sought to help police investigate drug traffickers. Nobody likes drug traffickers, right? RIPA in the UK, Patriot Act in the US, terrorism, right? Child control, child pornography, child sexual abuse, right? Mm-hmm. How can you possibly argue against these? And basically, the reason this is dangerous is it creates a false dichotomy, and this goes back to what you were saying. Either you're for us or against us. Mm-hmm. But what it also does is it makes it very difficult to argue against this, because even if you point out, well, these are the potential consequences. Well, what you're proposing is hypothetical, right? Well, no, it's actually not, because we've seen these negative consequences come to pass in a lot of countries. But also, maybe the benefit that is being pushed as the reason for these intrusions into our privacy are hypothetical, right? Can you prove to me that this is actually going to make it easier to track drug traffickers, or are the drug traffickers just going to go somewhere else? Mm-hmm. It's the argument that you see, unfortunately, used very often in the US, right? You make guns illegal, make guns criminal. Only criminals will have guns. Except here is a physical object, right? Here is not I guess some of my American friends would disagree. Here is not a fundamental aspect of your democratic rights. The ability to communicate freely, the ability to have a confidential life, to have your information, your very being, your identity private. Thus privacy.
Yeah. Do you want to get a little philosophical?
Please.
I'd like to do that. So let's look at the way, because I think it's part of this conversation, the way that technology may change the way we interact with people, may change society in general, but also our psychology. So what I'm trying to say here is that privacy is not what it used to be, right? We can't think the privacy today is the privacy that we would have considered privacy in the 1600 or in the 1000, whatever it was. now with technology and our phones, there is an extension of our brain and the chat that we do. Where I'm going is that it's deeper than just getting a mandate and a permit to search your house. These are mandates to search your brain, your mind. This is thought police in a way.
It can be. I
I
mean,
mean, I'm
let's be
going
honest.
to an
Let's be honest.
extreme, but it could
Yeah.
be because the encryption of certain messages, just sure you can assume that, oh, if you don't have anything to hide, why you do encryption? Well, whatever. That one is old, and you can't believe that. Yeah, you do it because you want the privacy of your thoughts or the conversation you have with your loved one, and nobody has the right, in my opinion, to infringe on that unless there is a real reason to do that. But even in that case, there is a limit to how deep you can go.
Well, there's another reason I want to add to that, just quickly, if I may.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, when I said I said earlier, take a step back, and I think this is philosophically, in terms of our principles, what we have to do as individuals and as a society, which is that it's none of your goddamn business.
It's
very broadly speaking.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
like for example, in Spain, I noticed that certain searches, right, now require some sort of an age thingy login, right, on Google, right. I'm not going to tell you what I'm looking for. Leave that to your own imagination. I'm not saying I was looking for porn. I'm not saying I wasn't. Who cares, right? It's none of your business. I'm a very active user on Blue Sky, right? There's a lot of erotica that's posted on Blue Sky, and erotica includes Peter Paul Rubens paintings from the 1600s. Ooh, sexy, right? Naked girls from 300 years, 400 years ago, and they require an age verification that can be either an ID upload or a face recognition. Unfortunately, it won't tell you how old it thinks you are, right? Which I thought was a bit disappointing. But it's none of your business what I'm looking at, right? Whether I'm looking at an odalisque from 300 years ago, whether I'm looking for, legal porn, who cares? You shouldn't care. And there is this titillating thought that, well, you should be ashamed of searching for whatever you're looking for. It's none of your business. And there's an additional factor I think that's very important to mention. What we do online, there is not a single definition. There's not a single common definition of what is quote unquote okay or not okay to do online. Is it violent content? Right? You live in the US. Right? You have primetime TV. Yeah, I live in Europe. We have primetime TV, right? We probably have more nudity on primetime TV. You guys have a lot more violence on primetime TV.
Depending on Italy, are you kidding me?
Okay, yeah,
You can't even talk about soccer without some.
Yeah, depending on whom you ask, this person may say, "Whoa, they're looking at something bad. Ooh, right, bad person. Right. Shame." And that is, I think, where we need to be very, very careful about why do we need privacy? It's not because you want to hide something or just because you think your data ought to be private. It's just simply because I have the right to. Go away.
Mm-hmm. Well, it comes down to infringing on other people. I mean, now we can go into freedom. What is the definition of freedom? But I don't want to go there. Meaning, yeah, you're free to do what you want unless then you infringe on other people's rights. And so you go into like a Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and we can talk.
Oh boy, that's a rabbit hole.
So let's leave it for another conversation. Let's focus on, because I know you have a hard stop in about 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes. Let's bring it back to where we started. So, in the past, we didn't have this technology. We had our home, we had our brain, we didn't have the internet, right? We will interact in our neighborhood. Probably the nosy neighbor will know everything about you. The cops were going around the city and asking information. It was more human, and I'm not saying it was better because people knew a lot about you anyway, unless you live in the middle of nowhere. Now we talk about the grid. If you're on the grid, which is the internet, then there is no escape from being controlled. But connect this to what you were talking about, meaning the internet and the digital society is part of our society. There's no
Yes,
going back, right? I mean,
that I think
we live in a real world and in a digital world, and it is our world.
and that raises a very, very important point, right? And that is that we shouldn't confuse privacy with privacy. And what I mean by that is in many cases, privacy as we know it conventionally is dead, right? Simply by virtue of the fact that no matter how many reject cookie dialogues from GDPR, it's a great law, by the way, we click away, right? It is very easy because of the technology that you mentioned to build profiles on people. Those who want to go completely you cannot go off grid and function in today's society. You simply cannot. We're surrounded by surveillance cameras. We're surrounded by, we use social media. We have supermarket loyalty points. There are innumerable profiles on you.
I love to talk about the supermarket points. People don't think about that.
But they don't care about you. They don't care about Marco Ciappelli, right? They don't care about John Solomon. They care about, individual tag number 3,557,296, right? And at some point, that kind of privacy is dead. And we're never going back. And it doesn't matter, frankly, because there's some things where, who cares, right? Mm-hmm. Your supermarket buying habits, yeah, sure, you could use that against somebody. You could use anything against somebody. However, when the privacy becomes, when the possibility is there to individualize that privacy, to put a face and a name on it. And this is one of the things that I think GDPR, which is, and also, CCPA in California, Data Privacy Act. These are some of these things that these privacy acts and commissioners are going against, is to prevent that technology, that omnipresent technology, from being used maliciously and abusively. And that is the privacy that we do care about. And this is where I think we really need to have a serious thinking and reflection session about things like chat control, things like, ID uploading. I was for example, age verification for young people on social media until a couple of weeks ago, because frankly, they're annoying, right? And an Australian colleague, Kim Chandler McDonald, she's also on the Cyan board.
I had a conversation about that with Australia. Yeah.
She convinced me otherwise, and because she made me think about what some of the consequences of this are. And she's right. I changed my mind. The privacy that we need to care about is when that technology that you mentioned can be used abusively, right? And on an individual level, when the power that whether it's a government or a company has over us as individuals can be and has been, this is not hypotheticals, has been used to affect our lives negatively, to keep us from having jobs, to keep us from getting health insurance, to provide information to malicious cyber attackers who can use that to defraud us, right? To keep us off the streets, right? All in the name of we're protecting society from those horrible child abusers, the terrorists, the money launderers, etc. That is why we need to care about privacy. I'm talking a lot here, but there is one aspect of this I think we do need to I do need to bring up, because I think we do need to be very, very conscious of why privacy is such a factor. And that is not just that it could be used to abuse you as an individual, but that it could basically set, and has been used to set, a precedent of attacking and marginalizing groups that are frequent victims. And I want to bring this up because it's in my notes here, and I really want to touch on this. And I think a lot of people may not appreciate how things like, for example, age verification, ID verification, and accessing encrypted content can affect these guys. May I pontificate on this for just a moment?
Go for it.
LGBTQ plus, whatever the preferred term is. I'm a straight white male. It's not for me to say, right? But this is a classic group that is a punching bag for, I think, a lot of people. Transgender, right? Another one. Let's face it, even in the quote unquote liberal enlightened EU, there are countries whom we all know and we're not going to name that have some very questionable policies towards these kinds of groups. This can go further. This can be people who are mentally challenged, who do not look like you or me, who are migrants, right? Oh, in the US, bad immigrants, right? All of these techniques, all of these policies can be used to go after these guys. And where does it stop? Catholics, right? The US 60 years ago had a debate of whether a Catholic should be allowed to be president or not. Yeah. I'm not saying we're going to be North Korea or Iran, because that would be exactly the same kind of straw man that is being set up by the anti-privacy advocates. What I am saying is that even in a liberal, enlightened, modern democracy, there are always going to be people who have different ideas from you or me about whom it is acceptable and even necessary to go after and even repress. Child pornographers, they're terrible people, right? No joke. Terrorists, I don't like terrorists, right? They're at the very extreme end of a very broad spectrum. And at the other end of that spectrum is your neighbor. And in between, there is a whole huge bunch of different people who think differently and whose existence, whose very ability to keep speaking, to exist next to us as our neighbors or friends or family or coworkers, is what makes diverse societies interesting, what makes them vibrant, what allows us to exist as a society. And if you prevent these people from being able to communicate securely, right? Whether it's about their sexual preferences. I lived in Chile in 2006, where our neighbor was gay. And he and his quote unquote assistant, whom he introduced us to, and this is democracy, right? Very furtively invited us after they realized that we're not reactionary, we're not, medieval in terms of our thinking. They invited us to a gay bar, my wife and me. And it was the cutest thing, because it was the only place in Santiago de Chile where they could hold hands, because it was illegal. It's punishable by prison, right? Yep. That's the problem. And we may think, this will never happen. This will never. I live in a country that has a political party that would like to see women go back into the kitchen. This is the problem. We may be taking away some of the tools of law enforcement to go after the really bad people, right? We are absolutely making law enforcement's job more difficult and the intelligence agency's jobs more difficult. Let's be honest about that, right? Mm-hmm. But we're also protecting you.
Well, it's always it's always a compromise. Is the art of compromise, and politics is the art of compromise. We don't think about that anymore. It's the art of going to the extreme nowadays. But it would be the art of compromise and say, yes, we can't have everything. We need to protect us from the extreme on one side, but we also need to protect the one on this side and everybody in between. So which one is the lesser evil, right? Mm-hmm. That's how we should think, instead of being reactionary and be like, oh, this just happened, let's take everything away. I know you're limited on time, and I know many people may be like, okay, so how do I protect myself? Well, this is not that show. We're not going to tell you that. You have to go and research. What I wanted to tell people, maybe, and I want to ask you this, as you are a guy that knows information security, call it whatever you want.
That's what people think.
You think a lot about it. And I think myself, we are in this kind of a mess, let's say, whatever. There's also a lot of beauty in it because of technology. I talk to people that, technology, AI, which, by the way, I need to say AI because we haven't used the word and we have to. Is technology gonna kind of be the savior of what technology created? Can we use technology to protect ourselves from something that technology has created?
Technology is neither the reason for it nor the way out of it. Technology is an element in both parts of that, right? There are a lot of factors in this, and the human nature, greed, apathy, these are all factors. I mean, why, if you want to have, give you a good example, German free speech law, for example, extremist symbols are banned in Germany, right? And especially in the US, people very often point to this as, oh, it's totalitarian. Oh, it's limiting free speech. The First Amendment. Well, Germany doesn't have a First Amendment. Germany has freedom of conscience. Germany also has extremely strong constitutional mechanisms, norms, and processes, government organizations, and a strong media, right? That holds the organizations that could potentially misuse these laws to account. And even in Germany, it doesn't always work, right? Very often it does get abused. There are extremes, but as you say, this is politics. It's not always going to be perfect. It's the same with privacy, right? Technology is, I can tell people, use Signal, right? Use services, understand that if you don't know what the product is and you're not paying for something, you are the product. When you're using Google, you're the product. Your information is the product, right?
By now, people figure that out.
A lot of don't, and a lot of them don't care, right? India is a good example. India by default installs an app on new smartphones, and they've recently, which basically can have access to all of your calls, SMSs, can access your photo. There was a huge uproar. I forget what it's called. And they've basically come out and said, well, we're still going to install it by default, but you can deinstall it, right? Technology is an aspect in which you can violate people's privacy. Technology is a way in which you can protect yourself. But what's most important is to understand, why are people pushing for the abuses that could impact your privacy, these fundamental principles. And how can you as a citizen, as an informed individual, whether it's through accountability, whether it's through, paying for media, the concept, right? Understanding how you can reduce your exposure to privacy violating companies, governments, etc., is the way out of this. And you know what? That's hard, and it's very often boring. Right. I chat control as an example here. It's by far it's not the only one by far.
It's way bigger than that. Yeah.
I wrote all of my Spanish 40. I sent emails to 40 Spanish members of the European Parliament. You know how many responded? One. Single one. Right. It is hard. It is something that we can only demand accountability and good practices for if we are engaged, if we take the time as citizens to inform ourselves. I'm Swiss. I get voting materials every couple of months. I have to read the booklet. I fill it out. It's something that I grew up with, right? It's something that I think every individual in a quote unquote free society should be doing, whether it's through privacy or anything else, to understand not only what do you believe in, but also how do I ensure that these rights continue to be respected by the people that basically work for you and me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think I have ended many episodes with this, which is with education, being responsible citizen, even the Constitution of the United States. I'm rereading a book about philosophy now, history of philosophy. When they talk about the founders and the nationalist paper, they say it's all going to work only and if the citizen are virtuous citizens. And by virtue, they don't mean being an exceptional citizen, but being knowledgeable and being involved. And this goes to any other democracy and goes in any other places that, unfortunately, democracy doesn't exist. And who's going to make changes is probably the people. So.
Well, it's that quote from Benjamin, or supposed, I don't know if it's real, from Benjamin Franklin in the U.S. A republic, if you can keep it. And we should never forget the meaning where republic comes from, res publica, the thing of the people, right? Yeah. So ultimately, this is our system, and we have to understand what is our role in this. What is the value of ourselves as individuals, our thoughts, our the very nature of our existence, and going into very philosophical territory. Yeah. But I think this is one thing where to wrap up, every single one of us has a duty to not only ourselves, but to society.
To educate yourself and to use, because the technology is going to be there, but we need to know how we use it and not just taking it because it's given to us and who cares. This is the end of it. I know you have to run. I have another podcast soon. I want to thank you. This was great. Let's do it again.
My pleasure.
We may have a panel. We may have a panel on this on ITSP Magazine with Sean. Everybody else, I hope you're thinking a lot right now, and I hope you're going to subscribe to the YouTube channel and to my podcast, Redefining Society and Technology, and go visit John on LinkedIn, and I'll put the links on how to get in touch with him anyway in the notes. So thank you, John.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity. Have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.